Well, it looks like Marvel Studios might be making some pretty big moves involving Jonathan Majors. As many of you know, there was a recent arrest up in New York City, and fans have been wondering about his future as Kang the Conqueror. Let's take a couple minutes to talk about the most recent update and why it really does look like Marvel, unlike Warner Brothers, is probably going to move on. Well, following some recent reports that Marvel Studios might be, quote, discussing options after Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania's star Jonathan Majors was arrested for an alleged assault, well, a new rumor has started making the rounds that indicates that Kevin Feige and his crew may actually already have another actor or a certain type of actor in mind should they choose to replace Majors as Kang. Now, if we roll the clock back a little bit, Majors was taken into police custody after supposedly physically assaulting a woman in her 30s who is believed to be his girlfriend. Now, since then, there's been a lot of back and forth. Jonathan Majors' lawyers claim that their client was completely innocent and probably the victim, promising to present evidence that would clear him completely of any criminal wrongdoing in the event. Now, we did get to see that evidence, which was actually a series of texts from the alleged victim. But quite honestly, this had the opposite effect for many people, and to some, it actually made Majors look a lot worse than it did improve the situation. And that leads us to today. Now, it appears this woman will not press charges, which isn't very surprising given some of the reports. And this means, from a criminal standpoint, Jonathan Majors probably won't face any backlash from the courts. But this doesn't mean there's not problems with Disney and Marvel, who may indeed take some action to avoid backlash, keeping Majors in the role. Now, the problem many people point to is this seems inconsistent with other actors who have had similar events. The first one that comes to mind in the superhero genre is Ezra Miller, who honestly last year went on an absolute tear of assaults and criminal charges, and he currently is still the Flash, but whether he is the Flash after the movie, we're gonna have to wait and see. Now, on this week's Hot Mic podcast, Jeff Snyder offered a little insight into the situation. Now again, this isn't from Marvel Studios or Kevin Feige, so we want to take it with a grain of salt, but Snyder has hit some home runs recently, and this is the kind of behind the scenes information that tends to lean on the more accurate side. Now, during the podcast he actually said, even though there hasn't been any movement on the Jonathan Majors front, I've heard that the kind of actor who, if Majors gets booted as Kang, someone like Damson Idris is the type of person that Marvel may look to replace him if that in fact happens. Now, Idris is a fairly new and up-and-coming British actor who's a big part of FX's Snowfall, but also has made some appearances in other projects like Swarm and Outside the Wire. He was also recently cast with Brad Pitt in Apple's untitled Formula One movie, meaning the guy definitely has acting chops and would likely do very well in almost any role Marvel decided to put him in. The question ultimately becomes, will Marvel replace Majors? And honestly, I think it's too soon to tell. The arrest in New York City obviously was a pretty bad thing, but there was a lot of other stuff that came from the entertainment community in New York that suggested that Majors was a bit of a problem and an abuser, which obviously complicates the situation because Marvel doesn't want to double down and let this one go, only to have the actor do something even more egregious in the future that does result in criminal charges and could unhinge major Marvel movies that are in the pipe. Like I said, a lot of people are pointing to Ezra Miller and how this seems pretty inconsistent with how the two studios are handling it. Now, obviously, different people are in charge of different studios, and Disney is more well known for not putting up with this kind of nonsense from their actors. With that said, many people feel like there's some other reasons why this is happening, and Majors is being held to a different standard than Miller. I don't know if this is true, but I will say this. Warner Brothers has their film complete, and they need to stand by Miller long enough to get that project released. I personally think there's absolutely no way Miller continues to be the Flash in the future DCU. So for them, the best path is to keep the status quo while moving forward until the film is released, and then they can make the changes that they want. Majors, on the other hand, is at the beginning of the journey. We don't have $200 million movies already in the can with massive financial risk at stake. His next movie, Kang Dynasty, is in the writing stages. So if they needed to replace him to avoid future issues, Marvel is in a much better position than Warner Brothers Discovery is with Ezra Miller. Now, how all this shakes out, we're going to have to wait and see. I am always an innocent until proven guilty type of person, but I will say the allegations and the text really don't make Jonathan Majors look very good. If ultimately he's recast as Kang, Marvel is going to have to really hit a home run here because Majors is a great actor, and I'm sure there's going to be a large segment of the fanbase that is pretty upset with his replacement due to the inconsistencies with how Ezra Miller was handled. Now, should Ezra Miller get the boot in June after the movie is released, well, then Marvel might do the same. And honestly, I have to wonder if Kevin Feige and the Marvel crew are waiting until after Warner Brothers makes their decision, and then they can make theirs. It is distinctly possible Feige already knows what James Gunn is going to do. They still actually talk to each other. So if after The Flash is released, if Ezra Miller is out, I think it's probably a 100% chance Majors will be too. But we'll have to wait and see.